Whoa, it's crazy. I'm finally done talking about Sonic Frontiers, and I'm finally on to other Sonic games. This time, Sonic Adventure 2. So, with this one, based off of criticism and feedback I was given on the last couple videos, I decided this time I was going to have a little note sheet so that I know what I'm talking about. Because if you didn't watch the last couple, if you didn't watch the Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Frontiers Final Horizon, I finally nailed it. I finally didn't say New Horizon like Animal Crossing. But if you didn't watch those videos, you'll know that it was a bit more unorganized because I didn't really have something to reference in terms of what I'm talking about. But this time around, I decided that after I played through Sonic Adventure 2, I was going to write down kind of like my overall thoughts, give myself like a little bit of like what I remember of the story so that I could talk about the story and it's not just like, I think this happened. So let me know if this is a better, if this is better flowing than the other ones. So hopefully it is. But with that being said, let's get into Sonic Adventure 2. I know this is probably probably the quickest we have gone into a review, because usually I have a little bit to rant about before, but this time I don't. So I want to start off this one with kind of talking about like the animation and like the voice acting and stuff, because with these older Sonic games, there's a bit to talk about in terms of those, because obviously these came out when 3D games were in their infancy, so there wasn't a lot of like there wasn't a lot that they could work with. This is when 3D animation was kind of like new, so like I'm gonna cut them some slack for this. But I gotta say that Sonic Adventure 2, and I'm gonna guess Sonic Adventure as well when I do play that one, but this one has some goofy ass animation. It's really hard to take the characters seriously, despite the story being good, which we will get into. But it's so hard to take the characters seriously in this one because of the goofy animation, and the voice acting as well was pretty bad in some points because it was like early 2000s cartoon type voice acting. It wasn't like the voice actors were taking the characters super seriously like they were now. So the delivery of lines were pretty bad at some points. My favorite delivery, though, I do want to talk about this. My favorite delivery in terms of the voice acting is between Shadow and Sonic when they're talking about like one of them being a faker, and Sonic just goes, "Faker!" That was just so funny to me. That was like probably the funniest line of dialogue to me, because just the way he says faker is so, it's amazing. You gotta try it out, or you gotta check it out. It's pretty great. I think that's also like one of like the most memed lines besides of like, "Where's that fourth damn Chaos Emerald at?" from Sonic, or from Shadow the Hedgehog. I think the faker line is like one of the most iconic lines in the Sonic fandom. So if you haven't seen that, you gotta go check out that clip. But I do gotta say, despite the goofy animation and the voice acting being kind of bad at some points, it does add to the charm of the game, because again, this is a game that released, I want to say, in the early 2000s or the tail end of the 1990s. I don't remember the exact. I want to say it was 2001 or 2002. Correct me if I'm wrong, it could have been 2000. All I know is it came out before Super Mario Sunshine, and Mario Sunshine took the whole protagonist is impersonated and the protagonist goes to jail type of thing. They stole that from this game, which is kind of funny that a Mario game stole something from a Sonic game. But despite the goofiness of the animation and the voice acting, it adds to the charm of the game. It's hard to take it seriously, but it just has that charm to it, where it's like you can't hate the game because of like the goofy animation and because of the mediocre to pretty bad voice acting. But despite that, despite the fact that the voice acting doesn't help with the story of this game was amazing. I'm going to try to take this, I'm going to try my best to make this chronological, based on like a chronological how, like the order of how events happen. So we're going to be starting with the Team Dark story, but then going to Team Sonic, back to Team Dark maybe. But then there's the last story, which we'll get into after that. But the Team Dark story starts off with Eggman going and tracking down Project Shadow because he found, I don't remember what it was, but he found some sort of like files or something from his grandfather, who is Gerald Robotnik, who's going to be important later on. So he wants to go track down Shadow and follow through with his the plans of his grandfather's experiment with the space colony arc. So he finds Shadow in order to get him on board with the plans, and I don't remember if it's like at the exact same time, or maybe this is a little bit after. No, this happens like around the same time. So Eggman tracks down Shadow, gets him to join his plans, and then he also hires Rouge to gather the Master Emerald pieces to help him to hunt down and to help him and Shadow hunt down the Chaos Emeralds. So he needs all the Chaos Emeralds in order to do what the plan is in his, I want to say in his grandfather's journal with the Space Colony arc. In order to go through with this plan, he has to get all the Chaos Emeralds, so that's what Rouge, Eggman, and Shadow are all doing throughout the entirety of the game. On the other side of the story, with Team Sonic, or the Team Hero, whatever you want to call it, we have Sonic being mistaken as for Shadow, so he is being tracked down by the government. So of course, we gotta love it when our protagonist is being hunted down by the government, and when he's running away from the Popo. Gotta love it. So he's running away from the government. He's mistaken for Shadow, so it's kind of like a whole chase where it's like the government are trying to get Sonic. Sonic is trying to get to Eggman to stop his plans, and then Eggman's trying to go succeed his plans. So it's like a whole freaking chain reaction of things going on. But while he's also trying to discover Shadow, he's also trying to stop Eggman's plans. Just typical Sonic stuff. He's trying to figure out who Shadow is. So, but there's this part where after I think it's after the first mission with Sonic, where you finish the escape, it cuts to Eggman trying to steal the Master Emerald from Knuckles, and he tries to steal it through Rouge. And I'll have a lot to say about Rouge later. I hate that bitch. I absolutely hate Rouge in this game. But because of this, though, the Master Emerald is split into pieces, and Knuckles has to go search for all the pieces. So he's got to go do his own thing. That's separate from everyone else. In the meantime, Tails is over here trying to stop the government from capturing Sonic, as well as communicating that Eggman is up to no good to the government. So Tails is kind of acting as like the middleman, where he's kind of stopping the government from being like, yeah, Sonic's the bad guy, Sonic's the bitch, we gotta knock him up and put him behind bars, into making them, realize that, Robotnik Eggman is not up to any good, and that he needs to be stopped. So there's a couple things that happen in there as well. So obviously, Team Sonic, they're trying to stop Eggman from doing his things, or from doing his evil plan, which we'll get into soon with the last story. And then Team Dark with Robotnik and them, they're trying to get the Chaos Emeralds for this plan, and it gets to a point where it's like about halfway through the game, Robotnik's like, yeah, humanity needs to surrender. You have 24 hours to surrender and to submit to the Egg Empire or something like that, and he blows up the fucking moon. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. They have been pretty bad about addressing that in Sonic games since it happened, besides Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings. By the way, great series. Go check that out. Absolutely amazing. Probably some of the best Sonic media we have gotten in recent years. Absolutely loved it. So anyways, after that happens, they have 24 hours to surrender. The president has 24 hours to surrender. And because of this, Team Sonic has to kind of speed things up. It gets to the point where they finally catch up. I think Eggman was hiding in like the desert, in like some pyramid, which really, like, when I was playing through the game, I was mostly, like, most of the time I was on call with my friend Gerfta's Gaming. He is a huge Sonic enthusiast, by the way, so it was kind of helpful to have him kind of like, telling me like kind of some of the lore while I'm going through the game if I have any questions, or because he kind of grew up with Sonic Adventure 2, if I had any questions about levels, which there were a couple levels that were really stupid, which we'll get into when we get into gameplay. There were a couple levels that were stupid, but it was kind of nice. But he told me, because I was like, because on these in these pyramids, or on this like desert base that Eggman has, it has a lot of like iconography. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. There's a lot of iconography of Gerald, or it looked like Gerald. It was like Robotnik's face or Eggman's face, but it was like white beards and stuff. So I was like, is this like Gerald? Like, is this Gerald's old base or something? And he was like, no, it's just iconography of Eggman. And I was like, huh, this looks like Gerald, like some sort of reference to Gerald, but I guess it isn't. So that was something I thought. I was like, whoa, I'm discovering this, but it was just, okay, it's just Eggman, but for some reason his beard's white. But anyways, they catch up to Eggman in there, and then I think he gets into space, gets to the space colony arc. The Team Sonic also go up to space, and they put a stop to Eggman's plan. They have to use a fake Chaos Emerald because, you know, Faker is such a huge part of this game. Imposters, like Among Us, huge part of this game's lore. I know, it's insane, crazy even. But, so it gets to the point where they have to go, and I think it was Tails created this fake Chaos Emerald. So they go and they try to go put it in the fake, or with the other Chaos Emeralds, because I think the other, they had all, Robotnik had all the Chaos Emeralds at the point, besides one, which Tails had. And they were gonna, it was the yellow one, and they were gonna give Robotnik the fake one, but somehow he knew it was the fake one, and like, I guess maybe he didn't know for sure, but Tails was like, how did you know it was the fake one? And it's like, Tails, you just told him the plan. So then he knew for sure it was the fake one. So bye-bye Sonic, and, you know, we think Sonic's dead, so I guess Robotnik gets his Chaos Emerald. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure he gets the Chaos Emerald. Because, yes, he does. He does. We'll get into that with the last story. So, Sonic's gonna go die. He's in this, like, pod that's plummeting down towards Earth. And for some reason, he's able to use Chaos Control, which I did mention. Shadow was able to Chaos Control. He has been able to Chaos Control since, like, he was introduced. That's how he got out of the first scene, where Sonic and Shadow meet for the first time. And Sonic's like, who are you? Who's this black hedgehog person? So Shadow Chaos controlled using the green Chaos Emerald there, but Sonic somehow was able to Chaos Control with the fake yellow one back onto the Space Colony arc, which was, I think it's because it had the same properties, but it wasn't as powerful, but like, it still doesn't make sense. I'm not like super duper caught up with all the lore of Sonic the Hedgehog, so maybe there's some other things I'm missing here that I don't understand, but Sonic somehow is able to Chaos Control. It leads to like him and Shadow like having their final stance, final face off or something, and obviously I think canonically Sonic beats Shadow. I'm gonna guess that's how it is. And Robotnik, on the Team Story, or on the Team Hero story, you beat Robotnik. On the Team Dark stories, Robotnik succeeds. But I think this is where we can get into the last story. So I think this is like a thing that it was, or a thing with all the adventure games, and I think Sonic Heroes as well. So all the adventure era games had this, like, there were different stories that played out the same events of the games, but it was from different perspectives. And then after you beat all those other perspectives, you unlock the final story, or the last story, I think is what it was called here. And Robotnik, Eggman, he gets all the Chaos Emeralds, and he's about to set off the Eclipse Cannon. But it doesn't go off like he thought it was. He was gonna like use it. I don't know what he was planning to do. Was he trying to blow up the Earth? Was that his plan? Was he really just gonna blow up the Earth? Very flawed plan. But anyways, he tries setting off the Eclipse Cannon on the Space Colony arc, and it just didn't work. But after this failed attempt, after the failed attempt, after the Chaos Emeralds are put into the Space Colony arc or something, this is when we learn more about Gerald's lore with the news broadcast. I don't remember all the lore. You would be better off looking at Gerald's lore from a person that actually knows all the lore for Gerald. But I do remember it being like something about like he was doing this for his granddaughter Maria, because her and his colleagues were killed because like some experiment went wrong or something. So like they were getting rid of all witnesses or something, and he was left surviving because the government needed him or something, and he wanted to get revenge on humanity. So he made a broadcast that would drop, a news broadcast that would drop when all like the space colony arc gets all the emeralds and like something like that. And he says that the space colony arc is gonna plummet to Earth. So because of this, because of the fact that everyone doesn't want the Earth to fucking be obliterated, even though I'm convinced that Eggman using this Eclipse cannon was gonna destroy the Earth anyways, everyone works together to prevent the arc from hitting the Earth. But, of course, Shadow, being Shadow, he wasn't on board with this. Because his whole thing was, he didn't remember exactly. His whole thing was he wanted to get revenge on humanity because he thought that was what Maria wanted. Like, one of his last memories was with Maria was him saying something about humanity. And he thought it was to get revenge on humanity for what they did. But in reality, it takes a little bit of convincing from Amy, but he remembers that what Maria really wanted him to do was to save humanity. And this makes him decide that he wants to help the heroes. And he goes, and while I think it was while Sonic and Knuckles were going to go put the Master Emerald in the pillar in the middle of the arc, I think it was, Shadow goes and fights the Bio-Lizard and defeats it. But the Bio-Lizard, after being defeated, emerges with the Space Colony arc, becoming the final hazard, which I gotta say, I'll get into the bosses later, but I gotta say, I am all, why am I saying I am all of me? That's not the song. Live and Learn. Live and Learn is such a great final boss song. I'll get into that later. But, so the Bio-Lizard, though, connects, or, merges, I don't know how to describe it, it merges with the arc, and Sonic and Shadow have to go super in order to defeat it. Let's just say it was a badass scene. It was super cool. I've seen the scene before on like YouTube or something, but like it was super cool though. Like after playing through the entire game, after suffering through some of the lows, which there were a couple in the last story, I'll probably be able to get into that very soon. But after suffering through some of the lows and going through some of the highs of the game, it was so badass of seeing Sonic and Shadow go super together to defeat the final hazard. But I will say the animation was kind of goofy because like their hands were doing a certain gesture that was kind of goofy. I'm not gonna say anymore. But there was that. So obviously, they defeat the Bio-Lizard, and when they after they defeat the Bio-Lizard, I think Shadow and Sonic use Chaos Control to bring the arc away from the Earth and like bring it back up near space. And because of this, Shadow plummets back to Earth and is presumed to have died. Obviously he didn't, but he did it to save Sonic, his friends, and the whole world. So Shadow got his ending. If this was the last Sonic game, because I'm pretty sure Sega was in like a pretty bad place financially at this time, so this could have been the last Sonic game if they really wanted it to. But Shadow would have had a satisfying start and end to his character if this was the last Sonic game. So great character right there for Shadow, going from hating humanity and wanting to get revenge on it to being its savior, basically. Quite literally being the ultimate life form. But after this, the credits roll, everyone contemplates on their perspective of the situation, and fucking Tails, I am convinced he is the reason that Eggman stays a fucking villain in this series. Because he's over here, he's like, maybe, like, he was like, my grandfather was one of the greatest scientists of all time, but he wanted to destroy humanity. Maybe I shouldn't follow in his footsteps. Maybe what I'm doing is wrong. And then Tails is over here, and he's just like, maybe, I don't know. All I do know is that everyone is okay. Or something like that. Oh my god, Tails, why? Why did you say that? That was such stupid dialogue. So, my headcanon is that Tails is the reason why Eggman is still a villain. In reality, that's probably not it. It's probably because they don't want to create a new villain for the Sonic series. But my headcanon is that it's all because of Tails' stupid 9 there. But that's the story. Honestly, like, the story, I didn't go super duper into the details and all the nitty gritty lore and stuff. I basically just covered the surface level here just because I don't want to go into, like, all the, like, crazy stuff, because that would make this video really long, as we are already 20 minutes in. But the story was honestly, like, the best. Okay, I've only played 2 Sonic games basically at this point. There are Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Adventure 2. Out of the 2 so far, Sonic Adventure 2 easily has the best story. Just like all of the Space Colony arc story and Shadow's backstory and just like all the stuff with Gerald and like getting into that and like the ultimate life form and the Biowizard and stuff. That was honestly like such a great story. And like I said, Sonic games, their stories aren't super deep most of the time, but this one goes like pretty deep into the story, and I really like that. I'm gonna say this now. I feel like I've been able to enjoy 3D Sonic games more than 3D Mario games, which is gonna be a hot take, especially for my channel. I've enjoyed my playthrough of 3D Sonic games more than my playthroughs of 3D Mario games because I really like the story. If Mario games would just push the story a little bit further than Princess kidnapped Mario go save Princess, then maybe objectively Mario games are better. But maybe I would enjoy it more because like there's more of a story and more of like a want to keep going through and, you know, discovering what happens next, because like Mario games are very, very surface level with the story, which there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone plays a Mario game for the platforming. But you could do the same thing for Sonic if the game is designed good, but there's also the story. So I want to say objectively, I haven't hit the lows yet of the Sonic series. Objectively though, the 3D Mario series is better than the 3D Sonic series because it's more, the quality is higher, but like, I guess the experience of a 3D Sonic game can be higher than the experience of a 3D Mario. There we go. Hopefully that makes sense. But now that we're done with the story, now that I've ranted about that for a good about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, I think we can finally talk about gameplay. So obviously, I think Sonic and Shadow's gameplay was pretty good. The levels were well placed for the most part. There wasn't really any like levels of theirs that I hated. I mean, the final level it was because I was still kind of getting used to the controls of the game because, you know, I just came off like Sonic Frontiers and like flawless controls, and then these ones are a bit more janky and stuff compared to Sonic Frontiers because it's like 25 years older. So obviously there's some jank to it, but honestly, like there were no like levels that I didn't like from like the Sonic and Shadow like levels or their gameplay. They controlled well. The homing attack was a little weird at first because like you gotta like wait a second then homing attack instead of like instantaneous like it was in Frontiers, so that took a little bit of getting used to. And I was gonna talk about the last level of Sonic. I was not super used to the rails, so that's why like I had a little bit of a struggle with that, but I didn't hate that level. It was still pretty good. But I do want to say though, the standouts for me though from my playthrough, especially the standouts of the entire game, for me was obviously City Escape. I want to say that City Escape is like basically the Green Hill Zone of 3D Sonic. It's like a perfect introduction to, you know, the 3D Sonic, like how it controls, like the pacing of it was perfect. It was like basically if they had Green Hill Zone in 3D, but not Green Hill Zone because like it's not Green Hill Zone. It's like that's kind of what it is. So that was pretty good. I thought Radical Highway was also pretty good. I really liked the atmosphere of that. That one also had like a pretty good hello roommate.
Hello, did I ruin a recording?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the middle of recording right now.
Oh,
yes, my roommate is making a cameo in my Sonic Adventure 2 video. Yippee! Anyways, Radical Highway was pretty good. I really liked the atmosphere of it. Obviously, Shadow controlled just like Sonic, so he controlled well, and the level design was great. And I also liked Green Forest and White Jungle. Atmospherically, I know I've been saying a lot of like atmosphere stuff But like the level was just like, it was like a lush jungle, and I really liked that. The music was great, of course, and like the platforming and like the quick sections were just like on point. So like probably some of the best levels in like 3D Sonic. Again, I haven't played many 3D Sonic games yet, but some of the best levels so far. Moving on to Tails and Eggman though, we'll get into Knuckles and Rouge soon. I know that in like the order of the gameplay it would be Knuckles next, but we're gonna talk about Knuckles and Rouge stages soon. But Tails and Eggman were alright. I wasn't a huge fan of how the mechs controlled. They weren't bad. They were manageable, but they were pretty clunky. And I just honestly don't see myself going back to those levels voluntarily unless I'm doing another playthrough of Sonic Adventure 2. I just don't see myself wanting to go back to those because of how clunky and slow the mechs are. So, yeah, there's just not really anything notable about these levels. I can't tell you about a single stage besides like maybe the first one where Tails is shooting government robots and saving Sonic from prison or something. But there was Mario Kart and Sonic. That was crazy. There was like 2 levels. I think you played as Rouge for one, and you played as Tails for one. And you were chasing after, for the Tails one, you're chasing after the president, because, you know, Tails needs to go find the president. And then for the Rouge one, you're chasing after Tails, but like you catch up to Tails, but you're not caught up to Tails, so then Shadow has to go chase after Tails, and he couldn't get Tails. Apparently Tails is a speedy motherfucker. That's what I got out of that. But yeah, those were honestly pretty fun. Like the kart racing, it wasn't Mario Kart, but it was fine as like a little side like distraction. But now we can get into Knuckles and Rouge, because that's all there really is to talk about in terms of character levels. God, I hated these stages. So Knuckles wasn't too bad until like later on. I actually fairly enjoyed Pumpkin Hill. That one was just like something we never really see in the Sonic series, like both atmospherically and I guess gameplay wise, because I should have explained it before, but these levels are like collectathons. You gotta find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald, or I guess in the case of a Rouge stage, 3 Chaos Emeralds. But Pumpkin Hill was honestly like, it was pretty fun. It was different. It was different compared to like the traditional, I guess, like level type you would see. Like it was like a spooky haunted Sonic level, and that was pretty interesting. But with Rouge, there were a couple stages that to this day still haunt me because of how long they took me. So the first one was the Rouge stage where you had to collect the Chaos Emeralds in 5 minutes. That one was stupid. You had to get really lucky about where the emeralds spawned. And then there was also the whole like switch mechanic where you had to go to the top level, and like depending on like which vaults the Chaos Emeralds could have been in, you have to like go and like find the switch for that. And you have a 5-minute timer too. And if you fail, you don't keep the emeralds that you found. You have to do it all over again. So I probably spent a good 1.5 to 2 hours doing this stage just because like I kept getting bad luck with where the emeralds would spawn, and I just did not know how to unlock these vaults for the longest time. And the hints were not helpful at all. That's another side tangent. The hints in these levels were really stupid. It was like we'll get into that stage very soon, because that's the next stage I want to talk about. But there's a Rouge stage where the hints were backwards, or some of them were backwards, and it's like, okay, that's cool. Thank you, game. And then like there was also some that were super vague, like under a dark shadow. It's like, yeah, no shit. Shadows are dark. Crazy. I wouldn't have guessed that myself. So there's that. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of these Rouge stages. But there's another Rouge stage. It's the one that looks like a damn Mario Galaxy stage. It was Mad Space, I believe. That one, so the problem with that one is there wasn't a time limit or anything, but it was like the controls on that one were especially really stupid. It was like the gravity would pull you down onto the planetoids you're on, if you're on those, and there'd be some like that you just can't escape because like the gravity just holds you down no matter what you try to do. And there was like there was one part in the game, or on this stage, that I was like spending like 30 minutes probably just trying to get this one emerald piece. I never got it. I even resorted to joining the freaking Sonic Adventure 2 speedrun Discord. I don't remember the name of the guy. I want to say his name was like Dustin or William or something. It was something like that. Shout out to him for trying to help me out. But like, I tried my damn best because I had an idea of where the piece was, and it was my last one at that point. But I just couldn't reach it. It was just so high up, and the gravity just would not allow me. So I had to restart, and then I think the next time I got luckier. But I spent way too long on that stage. That stage was bullshit. I never want to play it again. I never want to play through either of those Rouge stages again. But that's not the worst of it. We'll get into that soon. But before we get into like the final level, which there's a lot to talk about with that one, I do want to just kind of quickly go over the bosses. They were pretty good. There weren't really anything super crazy though. There was like the ones with the rivals, like where you're playing as Sonic, or not Sonic, where you're playing as Tails or Eggman and you're fighting the other. And then like, so basically the rival ones, and then like Sonic against Shadow and Rouge against Knuckles, you know, something like that. And then there's also the Egg Golem one, which you fight as both Sonic and as Eggman. So two different playstyles, which, you know, it's cool that they made two different boss fights basically, but it was kind of the same concept. Well, actually it wasn't. With the Sonic, when you had to go behind it, climb up the pillars, and then homing attack on the button on its head, I believe. And then with the Eggman one, you had to like shoot like its weak points or something. And then there was also that the King Boom Boo or something like that. And then also the mechs, the flying gun mechs or something. The King Boom Boo one was like, you had to like circle around him, find the switches to turn on lights, and then like dive into him or something like that. I don't remember. It was something basic, and then the mechs were just piss easy. They were just mechs that you homing attack into. Crazy. But yeah, the bosses were decent though, but they weren't super duper memorable besides the final two, which we'll get into after the final level. This damn fucking level. When I tell you that like this is probably like one of my least favorite stages of any game, I am not lying. This shit took forever. So it's basically like a gauntlet of like where you play as each of the characters besides Shadow. And you start off with Tails and Eggman. So to start off with Tails, his was fine. It did take a little bit of time to understand like the time stopping mechanics, and to like readjust to the clunkiness of the mechs, but it wasn't anything too bad. And I can say the same thing about Eggman's part. His was a little bit longer because there was like an actual checkpoint there. His was a little bit longer, so I enjoyed it a little bit less. But it wasn't horrible. But like I mentioned before, the mech gameplay just isn't super great. So, yeah. But then we get into Rouge, my favorite character of all Sonic. It was a Rouge stage, so you had to solve a puzzle in order to drain water, and the puzzle was a bit annoying to understand. I don't remember what the solution was. I'm pretty sure it was like you had to climb pillars, or maybe that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was you had to climb pillars. You had to like. There was something I couldn't tell you honestly. I don't have much here in my notes about it because it was just a Rouge stage. All I know is I remember the puzzle being pretty annoying. But that wasn't even the worst part, because next we got Knuckles. And I gave shit to Rouge's stages for being awful. But Knuckles, his part in this stage was the fucking worst part in the entire game. So, it was a Knuckles stage, so it was a collectathon, but it was also a water stage. Of course it was a water stage. And those just suck in any game. But with Sonic games, if you don't remember, you have basically a breathe meter that isn't a breathe meter that just kind of runs out when it feels like it. So you gotta constantly be making sure that you're making your movements quick enough to get to a bubble or to reach air, or else you can't, or else you just fucking die. I will admit, honestly, I'm willing to admit this right now. When it came to this stage, because from what I was hearing, if you die in this stage at all, if you game over, you get to do it all over again. And I was like, I am not doing this. And because I was playing this on a totally legit way of playing the game, on a totally real Sega Saturn, and totally, Dreamcast? On the Sega Dreamcast, and totally not emulating this, I found the infinite life cheat code. Cancel me all you want. I don't care. This is the only time in the game, and I didn't want to. But I also didn't want to have to replay this entire stage again. So, you know what? I'll admit it. I used infinite lives. I cheated a little bit. But that's not it. I also, in this Knuckles part, I figured out the first part of the puzzle to open up the door. And then there's like another section, which wasn't too bad, where you open up another door. And then there was another section after that, where you have to like swim very precisely into this door, into this room, and like pause time again, so that you don't go flying back out. I will admit it, I used save states as well. I did the double crime. I used infinite lives, and I used save states. Cancel me. Again, I don't care. I'm willing to admit this, because I'm not gonna just be like, yeah, that shit was easy. That shit sucked. That Knuckles part was easily the worst part of probably any game I've ever played. So of course I'm going to use save states. Of course I'm going to use infinite lives. Shit on me in the comments. I'd love to see it. But, yeah. Sonic's part wasn't too bad, at least. It was better than the collectathons. So, it was a godsend compared to those. But there was nothing too crazy about it. It was just another Sonic level. But, after that final level, we get the boss with Shadow against the Bio Wizard, and it was a bit difficult compared to the other bosses because, like, I'm gonna admit it, the bosses in this game weren't too difficult. Like, I struggled a little bit with the Eggman, Egg Golem boss. That was a little bit difficult compared to others, but, like, they weren't anything too crazy. But the Bio Wizard was a bit more difficult because, like, there was the black orbs that were, like, you had to, like, slide or somersault under or something like that. It was weird, but it took a little bit of like understanding. And then there's like parts where like after I would like homing attack onto the Bio Wizard, I would just like randomly fall into the sand and die, and I have to do it all over again. So that was fun, but it wasn't super hard, honestly. When especially compared to that final level, but when you got used to its attack patterns as well, it wasn't too crazy. But then after that, after the Bio Wizard, you know, obviously, as I mentioned before, it merges with the Space Colony arc, and it becomes the final hazard. That fight was badass, because you go as Sonic and Shadow, and go Super Form, and you control them both throughout this fight. Not at the same time, kind of alternate between the two. But it wasn't a difficult fight. It was more so kind of like a victory lap for making it like to the end of the game, and especially for making it through that final behemoth of a level. It was kind of like a congratulations, you made it to the end. Here's a badass fight against this derpy ass like lizard thing that's connected to like a fucking weapon in space. Go kill it as the protagonist and the anti-hero. It was badass, and like with Live and Learn in there as well, it was a great fight. I personally want to say that I'm Here was just slightly over it in terms of like a final boss theme, but Live and Learn was definitely really great. But yeah, that's kind of it for the game. I just want to like just to kind of close out here. In general, I feel like that the game was great. It obviously has some of that Sonic clunk we come to know from the series, but it did lead to some funny moments that you just can't be mad about. And obviously it also led to some moments that you can be mad about, especially with those Rouge and Knuckles stages. I should probably stop mentioning those, or else I'm going to give myself PTSD. Vietnam flashbacks. But it was overall a great time, and the game was mostly an enjoyable time from start to end. There were a few stages that were kind of like, okay, that wasn't great, but as a package, the game was pretty good. Would I recommend you playing it? Fuck yeah. 100%. Play it for the story, play it for the great Sonic gameplay, but you will have to suffer through some of the like the downs of the game to experience this game to its fullest. But yeah, I would recommend playing Sonic Adventure 2. That's all I really gotta say, though. I kind of summarized my thoughts here on the game in this matter of 40 minutes of recording. Yeah, 40 minutes. I think my roommate went damn when I said that. He's nodding his head yes. So I hope if you did watch all the way through, this was a better format. It was more organized and less and likes and just unorganized junk compared to the other ones. This should be the norm for this kind of like video style going forward, where it is more structured and I have like notes to talk about, so I know what to talk about and not just kind of going off memory. So again, let me know if you did enjoy this one. I think this one turned out better, honestly, just kind of looking back at it. But yeah, that's it for this one. I'll let you guys go now. I'm the biggest nub on YouTube, Prestendo, signing off, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.